So this is the part of the show where we spend a moment to reflect on big stories that you should know about but aren't necessarily on your front pages. Today we're honing in on this. It's been exactly 3 years since AmaBhungane investigative unit published the first hashtag Gupta Leaks investigation. 3 years after that probe, AmaBhungane has come across information on kickbacks totaling 9 billion rand paid and pledged to the Guptas and associates by 2 Chinese rail companies in Transnet locomotive deals. Now, Stefaans Brummer is at AmaBhungane and has spent months really following the money trail, matching payments that moved from Transnet to Hong Kong and UAE bank accounts. And he joins us now for a bit more details on this. Stefaans, thanks very much for your time and welcome to the AM report. So 36 months since we first came across the Gupta Leaks. Let me start by just getting your reflections on what's changed and perhaps what hasn't since then.
Morning. Look, clearly everything has changed. The country looks very different, and not just because of coronavirus, but also nothing has changed. The sad thing is, of all the billions stolen, very, very little has been recovered. There's been very, very little accountability, and certainly in terms of these locomotive contracts that we've been looking at, and that are the biggest single instance of corruption in South Africa's history, or at least in post-apartheid history, there has been zero accountability.
Yeah, and I guess, that adds even more concern to what you are about to publish later today. Take us through this 9 billion rand that's been paid and pledged to the Guptas. I mean, it really does read like a movie script.
Right, well, maybe I can't tell it quite the way that a movie script would, but yes. So when we published our first story on the Gupta Leaks 3 years ago, we spoke about 5.3 billion estimated kickbacks that had been paid on these locomotive contracts. What we now have is absolute proof of 9 billion. We published the actual contracts, 8 contracts in total that have been signed by very, very senior people within these 2 Chinese rail companies. 9 billion that would be kicked back to the Guptas on these locomotive contracts. Of course, this then oiled the wheels of bribery back in South Africa. Now, what we've been able to do is to, also from leaked bank records, offshore bank records in the UAE and in Hong Kong, we've been able to match up 3.7 billion that was actually paid. Now, that was by late 2016. So, of course, after that, we don't have any more bank records to look at, but clearly then the kickbacks would have continued flowing into this big Gupta laundromat. And, just to give you a sense of comparison here, the arms deal at the turn of the century that so excited investigative journalists and investigators the world over. We were talking then in 1999 rands of 1.5 billion, perhaps total kickbacks paid. So now we're getting to a significantly more serious amount. But again, to get back to the real problem here is that there's no accountability. The company that overcharged Transnet, in other words, the South African public, by billions to be able to pay these billions to the Guptas. They've since merged. They are now the CRRC Corporation. It's a Chinese state-controlled, although listed company, so it has all these corporate responsibilities. It has the might of the Chinese state behind it and the accountability that should be coming with being a state organization. And it has disappeared into thin air. It has not responded to any Transnet requests to try and come to some form of a settlement. Transnet itself has been at best very, very weak in its attempts to impose any kind of accountability. And here we're sitting 3 years after we showed the first kickback contract. The evidence has been coming out in drips and drabs. There's been no question that there is very serious corruption, that billions of our money has disappeared into places where it certainly should not have gone, and nothing has come of it.
Yeah, and that's certainly a worry, considering, of course, that there's also no telling when the Zondo Commission might be able to resume, as at least we've known it to operate. But, the Guptas have been, the central players in this, and perhaps, we've reflected on them in that role, rightly so. But surely there's also been other enablers, particularly in this 9 billion rand deal that you're also exposing today. Who are some of the other sort of key players enabling some of these dodgy deals, for lack of a better term?
Look, I think it's a whole value chain. And of course, the armies of consultants that helped Transnet in the very beginning make a case for, well, we need thousands and so many locomotives because freight volumes are going to ramp up so much. There was a whole industry, basically. And we're talking about the McKinsey's and Regiment's Capital, the local advisory firm, that helped Transnet ramp up the figures. And of course, this happened in cahoots with the Guptas and whoever thought, well, now, the bigger the contracts, the more they're going to eat from this. Then we're talking about professional people who ran our state-owned entities, and in this case, Transnet, where again, they were quite willing to kind of negotiate in reverse. So where the one really badly affected contract was for 1,064 locomotives, and where it should have cost initially in the late 30 billions, eventually it ended up costing 54 billion. And that was really Transnet negotiating in reverse so that it could pay more billions to the locomotive manufacturers, who then in turn could kick back more of those billions to the Guptas. Simple as that. Of course, then you go further down the value chain, you've got HSBC, which in Hong Kong saw these billions flowing into its accounts and no red flags go up. You've got Habib Bank in Dubai, same story. This money flows in, very obviously the product of corruption, and no one puts a stop to it.
Yeah, no, all of this, of course, culminating in some way to today, as we look forward to you publishing some of those revelations. Thanks very much for making time and getting us into the picture. Stefaans Brummer is with the AmaBhungane investigative unit. We're hearing today that yet another expose on the way, detailing how about 9 billion rand may have been paid and pledged to the Guptas and the associates through two Chinese rail sort of deals involving Transnet. Just when you thought nothing else could come out of the Gupta Leaks, here we are.